Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekha Chariwag, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. Today we are going to discuss a module titled Green Revolution 1. This module is part of the larger paper called Agrarian Social Structure and Change. This paper is coordinated by Dr. Manish Thakur of IIM Kolkata. In this module on Green Revolution, first we are going to start with the context of Green Revolution. Then we are going to focus on what was really done as part of the Green Revolution. Additionally, we are going to focus on the extent and spread of Green Revolution in different parts of India. Further, we will also look into the achievements of Green Revolution in India and also try to understand the significance of Green Revolution, especially in terms of its relationship with agrarian structure in India. The adoption of technological interventions in agriculture in the form of Green Revolution had a certain historical context both in India as well as the world was concerned. In fact, an understanding and appreciation of the Green Revolution can be gathered when we situate the intervention in the wider context of the issue of food security in India. There was an international context to the Green Revolution as well. It was a technological response to the worldwide food shortage which became threatening in the world in the period after World War II. In the 20th century, as the empire gradually receded from different parts of the world and nation states emerged in its place as new forms of political organization, they had to confront the problems of a gradually aggravating food shortage on the one hand and high rates of population growth on the other. The colonial powers had done little to improve the food production systems in these countries which were one part of their empire. Now the new nation states were confronted with the problem of feeding the hungry millions. In almost a parallel manner, the massive public investments in modern scientific research in agriculture took place and over a period of time led to dramatic breakthroughs in agricultural yields in industrial countries of the West. An example of the growth of wheat in England would provide to us an idea of the above. According to an estimate, why it took nearly 1,000 years for the yields in wheat to increase from 0.5 to 2 metric tons per hectare, it took mere 40 years for the yield to climb from 2 to 6 metric tons per hectare. Modern plant breeding, improved agronomy and the development of inorganic fertilizers and modern pesticides fueled these advances. Most industrial countries achieved sustained food surpluses by the second half of 20th century and eliminated the threat of starvation. These advancements reached the developed countries rather slowly, which resulted in widespread hunger and malnutrition in Asia by the mid-1960s. The developing countries like India increasingly became dependent on food aid from rich countries during this time. A report of the U.S. President's Science Advisory Committee in 1967 concluded that the scale, severity and the duration of the world food problem are so great that a massive, long-range, innovative effort unprecedented in human history will be required to master it. In response, Rockefeller and Ford Foundation took the initiative in establishing an international agricultural research system to help transfer and adapt scientific advances to the conditions in developing countries. The initial investment were in research on rice and wheat and two of the most important food crops for developing countries. The breeding of improved varieties combined with the expanded use of fertilizers, other chemical inputs and irrigation led to dramatic yield increases in Asia and Latin America beginning in the late 1960s. In 1968, United States Agencies for International Development (USAID) Administrator William Gord coined the term Green Revolution to describe this phenomenal growth in agricultural production. This Green Revolution came to be seen as a relief for food deficient underdeveloped nations. It went on to transform farming practice in many regions of the tropics and subtropics where the principal food crops were wheat, rice and maize. Since the colonial times, Indian agriculture had shown many ups and downs, although it had the potential to do well. Indian agriculture in most of the pre-World War II period was not too productive. Yields of the most principal crops showed a decline. During this period, the peasants also had shifted the crops to earn larger harvest and better income. Thus, in Bengal, the change in relative prices induced shifts from paddy to jute, and in Punjab from wheat to cotton, and in Saurashtra from bajra and cotton to groundnut. Further, a large part of the country's gross cropped area was under food crops and dependent on rain-fed agriculture, making it vulnerable to the vagaries of the monsoon. Irrigation was available only in limited areas. Though in the early 1950s there was an increase in the production due to an improvement in practices of planning, increase in the net sown area, and scientific practices of statistical estimation. This decelerated gradually. In the following decade itself, India experienced two severe droughts in the mid-60s in quick succession. Agriculture recorded a negative growth and the country faced a severe food shortage, leading India to export millions of tons of food grains, mainly wheat, from America during the next 2 years under the PL 440 program. In fact, a famine situation was averted in India during the 60s because of these food imports. Agriculture as a sector has been relatively neglected by the Indian government in its initial 5-year plans. But droughts, food shortage, decline in agricultural productivity, etc. made the government realize the importance of institutional support and innovation, and the development of an agricultural policy for a sector whose total share of the country's GDP in the decade of the 1950s was about 55%. The significance of agriculture in India also rose from the fact that its development was an essential condition for the development of the national economy. Indian planners realized during the second and the 5-year plan periods when the failure of agricultural sectors fell disaster to the entire planning process. Any positive or negative change in the agricultural sector has a multiplier effect on the entire economy. Therefore, the government devised a new agricultural strategy in order to make the country self-sufficient in food production within the shortest possible time. The Green Revolution was thought to be a possible alternative which would take the country towards self-sufficiency in food and meet the hunger needs of the people. Increased agricultural production would have several effects in terms of availability of more food in the country and a decrease in the dependence on food imports. It would also mean a release of the scarce foreign exchange resources for other sections of the economy. What was done as part of the Green Revolution? As is evident to you from what you have heard so far, Green Revolution was made possible due to the scientific and technological inputs that were brought into agriculture initially under controlled conditions and later popularized in different parts of the world other than the areas of origin. In hot tropical regions, one of the great barriers to increased grain production is that when traditional plants are heavily fertilized, they shoot up to an unnatural height and then collapse. If you are grown closely enough together to prevent this, one plant shades the other and the yield is reduced. To achieve higher yields for rice and wheat, scientists developed plants that were more responsive to plant nutrients and those had shorter, stiffer straw to support the weight of heavier heads of grain. They also needed to develop varieties that would mature quicker and grow at any time of the year, thereby permitting farmers to grow more crops each year on the same line. This would provide some solution to the increasing problem of food security. New varieties also required to be developed in such a way that they would be resistant to major pests and diseases which flourish under intensive farming conditions. Another consideration was also to retain desirable cooking and consumption traits. During plant development experiments in Mexico, after tests involving 40,000 crossbreeds of plants, it was found that if short stem grains were thickly sown at the right depth and adequately irrigated, it would take massive dose of fertilizers without becoming lanky to give spectacularly high yields. Eventually, strains were produced with inbred resistance to some of the worst pests. Borrowing from rice breeding work undertaken in China, Japan, Taiwan, the International Rice Research Institute in Philippines allows semi-dwarf varieties that met most of these requirements. Similar achievements were made for wheat after Norman Borlaug later awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his work across the Japanese semi-dwarf varieties with Mexican wheat at what is now known as the International Center for Maize and Wheat Improvement in Mexico. Although the term Green Revolution originally described developments for rice and wheat, high-yielding varieties have since been developed for major food crops important to developing countries including sorghum, millet, maize, cassava and beans. Norman Borlaug has been hailed as one of the most renowned plant breeders in history. Popularly known as father of Green Revolution, he went on to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970s in recognition for his contribution to world peace through increasing food supply. Borlaug developed semi-dwarf, high-yield, disease-resistant wheat varieties and even convinced politicians in countries like Mexico, India, Pakistan to introduce high-yielding variety along with modern agricultural production techniques. As a result of such interventions, Mexico not only became an exporter of wheat, production also doubled in countries like India and Pakistan. Borlaug introduced several new innovations. Firstly, he and his colleagues laboriously crossbred many thousands varieties of wheat to produce plants that would be disease and pest resistant. Secondly, he crafted new varieties of wheat which could hold more grain. These yields were boosted. Thirdly, he also devised a new technique of shuttle breeding, growing 2 successive plantings each year instead of one usual crop in different altitudes and climates. In the face of opposition from prevailing agricultural orthodoxies, Borlaug persisted. This gave results as if it not only added to the production and allowed the plants to get used to different climatic conditions of the region. Throughout his years of research, Borlaug's programs often faced opposition by people who consider genetic crossbreeding to be unnatural or to have negative effects. Environmentalists have criticized Borlaug's work for bringing large-scale monoculture, input-intensive farming techniques to countries that had previously relied on subsistence farming. But at the same time, his techniques have found enormous support and were even extended to many African nations like Ethiopia, Ghana, and Guinea. Extent and spread of Green Revolution. As a result of the new agricultural strategy, cropped area under improved seeds has grown up from about 1.5 million hectares during the 1970-71 to nearly 75 million hectares in 95-96. The new varieties are of short-term duration and consequently instead of growing 1 crop or 2 crops, sometimes even 3 crops are grown. Cultivation of new Mexican varieties of wheat has met with unprecedented enthusiasm among farmers in Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, Rajasthan, Western UP. A situation even developed in which demand for seeds made by farmers exceeded the supply. But in the case of rice, new varieties which were tried and found successful on laboratory scale could not be successfully applied on the field. Some breakthrough has been achieved in rice growing areas by developing better and more accessible varieties like IR8. The introduction of these new high-yielding varieties of wheat, rice and maize came to be known as Green Revolution. In fact, in India, it was due to the initiative of Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, agricultural scientist, that Green Revolution was made possible. Initially, the area of its most successful application has been mainly in the tropical wetlands of less developed and newly industrializing countries such as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia and China. According to Friswell and Moore, the high-yielding varieties were not the product of genetic engineering, they were the result of traditional plant breeding methods in which hybrids are produced by cross-pollinating unrelated parents. Where they were properly introduced, high-yielding varieties resulted in increased crop production and reduced dependency on food imports. A full-fledged system of international agricultural research centers known as Future Harvest Centers now works on many aspects of developing countries' agriculture. Today, they are part of the consultative group on international agricultural research. What did the Green Revolution achieve? The achievements of Green Revolution were numerous, some of which have been elaborated. 1. Increase in food production due to their ability to respond with higher yields of increasing application of fertilizer and their ability to produce 2, sometimes even 3 crops a year, high-yielding variety seeds have been brought real and substantial increases in crop production. Production of rice and wheat in developing countries increased 75% between 1975 and 1980 with only a 20% increase in the area planted to these crops. According to an estimate provided in Indonesia, rice yielded had increased. In India, production more than doubled between 1916 and 1973. During this period, total annual grain production rose from 77 metric tons to 201.5 metric tons. Increase in acreage was also responsible for the increase in production. By the mid-1980s, approximately 50% of the wheat and nearly 60% of the rice area of developing countries were sown to high-yielding variety strains. In India, less than 100 hectares of land sown to high-yielding varieties in 1965, over 50 million hectares had been converted by 1980. In Punjab, the proportion of wheat and rice under the high-yielding varieties was respectively 96 and 95% in 78-79. The introduction of high-yielding varieties had spread rapidly. In 1983, China sold 95% of its rice area and Latin America 82% of its wheat area to these varieties. Presently, the high-yielding variety IR36 rice plant developed by the International Rice Research Institute is planted on about 11 million hectares worldwide, making it the most widely grown variety of any crop. The benefits of high-yielding variety seeds have been significant. These seeds have increased the reliance of the developing countries on food grain imports. The population increases in these countries have delayed and to some extent neutralized the benefits, but it is still considered to be worth the effort. In fact, the single largest benefit said to be occurring from Green Revolution has been that these miracle seeds have probably averted famine and starvation of millions of human beings. As yields of rice and wheat doubled and profitability increased, farmers increased the areas under rice and wheat at the expense of other crops. These changes more than doubled cereal production in Asia between 70 and 95, while population increased by 60%. According to an estimate, instead of widespread famine, cereal and calorie available per person increased by nearly 30% and wheat and rice became cheaper. Third, boost to agricultural production and employment. According to Dutt and Sundaram, the successful adoption of the new agricultural technology has led to a continuous expansion of the area under crop, increase in total production, and the rise in agricultural productivity. Impressive results have been achieved in wheat, rice, maize, potatoes. The adoption of new technology has also given a boost to agricultural employment. It has led to diverse job opportunities created by multiple cropping and shift towards hired workers, though at the time there has been displacement of agricultural labor by extensive use of agricultural machinery. Modernization of agriculture. As more and more farmers now take to the new technology and modern capital equipment, there would be a shift from traditional subsistence agriculture to modern commercial agriculture. Modernization, this view appears to be synonymous with the use by the farmer of modern scientific inputs and modern capital equipment in agriculture. But this has been of a limited nature because of the differences in the size of the farms and the capacity of small farmers to utilize technology to boost their productivity. Rise in agricultural wages. Agricultural wages reflect a rise after Green Revolution as evidence from villages in Punjab and Haryana. Agrarian has shown in a paper the district-wide distribution in terms of average wage rates and found that during this period the wage structure in Punjab and Haryana region was altered. This came out after a long period of zero growth. It is generally held that Green Revolution was responsible for improving the conditions of rural poor in India, and wages paid are taken as indicators for such improvement. But without an estimate of number of days of work, such real rise in wages does not say much about economic condition of the group. Thus, Gauck says that though there was a rise in the growth rates of production, probably much more compared to the rates of the real wages, the laborer may have received actually a smaller share of the gains, leaving him poor in the long run. Benefits accruing to farmers from the introduction of new technology and reduction of poverty. It is that Green Revolution, by providing increased returns from land, was responsible for raising farmers' income, which led to an overall reduction of poverty. Greater money to spend and new needs for farm inputs, there was a general increase in demands for goods and services. This stimulated the rural non-farm economy and generated a new income and employment. According to an estimate, real per capita incomes almost doubled in Asia between 1970 and 95, and poverty declined nearly 3 out of every 5 Asians in 1975 to less than 1 in 3 by 1995. The absolute number of poor people fell from 1.15 billion in 1975 to 825 million in 1995, despite a 60% increase in population. In India, the percentage of rural population living below poverty line fluctuated between 50 to 65% before the mid-1960s, but then declined steadily to about one-third of the rural population by 1993. The Green Revolution is also said to have contributed to a better nutrition by raising incomes, reducing prices, which permitted people to consume more calories and more diversified diet. Big increases occurred in per capita consumption of vegetable oils, fruits, vegetables, and livestock products in Asia. Studies have apparently shown that much of the steady decline in poverty is attributable to agricultural growth and associated decline in food prices. Strengthening of backward and forward linkages. The new technology introduced by Green Revolution and consequent modernization of agriculture strengthened the linkages between agriculture and industry. Even under traditional agriculture, the forward linkage of agriculture with industry was always very strong, since agriculture supplied many of the inputs of industry, but backward linkage of agriculture to industry, that is, farmer using the finished products of the latter, was weak. However, agriculture modernization has created a larger demand for inputs produced and supplied by industries to agriculture, and thus a backward linkage has also become quite strong. In fact, the introduction of high-yielding varieties to agriculture has led to an expansion of specific industries like that of fertilizer, agricultural machinery, and so on, rise in agricultural surplus, and increasing opportunities for investment. According to Sen, the real significance of Green Revolution lies in the sizable agricultural surplus that it created when opened up several possibilities. Apart from meeting the food requirement of the growing urban and also to some extent the rural population without requiring any policy intervention as such, there was also another fact. The increased income of the farmers could be partly spent on consumption goods and partly on agricultural inputs that are produced in the non-farm sector of the economy. This has led to an expansion of the domestic market and the larger sales and income for the non-farm industries. But above all, the presence of an agricultural surplus represented something more than relief. It represents potential investable capital, all or at least part of which can be utilized for investment in any sector of the economy. Though it is not automatic, there is no guarantee that all or part of the surplus will automatically flow into savings, hence into investment. Herein lies the opportunity afforded by the Green Revolution to tap the part of its investable capital for generating a faster rate of growth in non-agricultural sector through appropriate policy measures. Students, in conclusion to this module on Green Revolution, we have focused on how Green Revolution has brought about a socio-economic transformation within rural India. Further, because of the whole idea of Green Revolution, we also engaged with a whole policy of new agricultural strategy that has been initiated in India. Further, we have also looked into how Green Revolution is very important as it helps in addressing the whole issue of food shortage and the question of food security within India, especially in relation to modernization in agriculture, whether the use of scientific and technology inputs within agriculture would help us to solve the whole issue of food security is also an important concern with regard to Green Revolution. At the end, we will also focus on the role of government and international policies with regard to Green Revolution. Thank you.